What's up, everybody? Welcome to a special live stream. I'm super amped. Oh, you know what? I just realized my audio is not recording for the podcast. So technical difficulties, part of the intro, I suppose. All righty, Dwighty. We should be ready to rock. And there you go. Okay, now we are. Okay, welcome to the Ivan Herrera Show. We are so excited. Rather, I'm so excited because I am going over some pretty important matchups. We have the NFL is back. We have week 1 kicking off tomorrow. We have an amazing matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens, rematch of last year's AFC Championship game. Then we got the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 of the top NFC teams. And then, of course, I have on top with me today, Mr. Cole Crockett, back once again. And yes, we're going over these matchups. We're going to go in detail as far as who are some must starts, who are some guys that you should be focusing on. And for the most part, it's not going to be too hard, considering this is week 1. There is so little that we know as far as what these teams are capable of, considering that, of course, there's been some changes within the teams themselves, personnel, coaching. But with that, though, let's go ahead and get into it, Cole. But first and foremost, before I do that, I wanted to ask you, how are things going on your end?
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Always excited to be on the show and looking forward to the NFL season. I mean, this is what we've been preparing for since February, right? So
that's right.
Time to take all of those perceived edges that we thought we had, all of that return on investment we think we're about to make, all of that total fun we're about to have, all that league dominance that we're about to experience. Time to actually put all that to the test and see what happens.
You know what's crazy, man? Exactly 24 hours from now, we'll be reacting to what we hope will be a good game. And it's crazy how even 48 hours from now, we'll be reacting to us having now 2 games under our belt, getting into the weekend. And I remember one thing that you said, and I'm going to actually borrow this from you. I remember when we were getting ready for the draft, you said just 2 more sleeps, as in like,
yes.
2 more sleeps somewhere. But now it's just 1 more. We go to bed tonight, and the NFL's back.
Although 2 more sleeps until we get to see what happens in Brazil, right? I mean,
yes.
No tweeting from the stadium, like from the country. Like, it's just going to be, they have to stay. They're all going to stay in their rooms. I mean, that's going to be interesting. I actually, one note I wanted to mention was, it's interesting because the game between the Packers and the Eagles, I don't expect many surprises, right? We know what to expect from both offenses. We know they're both going to be solid, efficient. Defenses are going to be okay. It's going to be a good game, I think. But the whole Brazil thing just kind of throws all that, throws a little bit fun into the mix. And so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree anymore. And just like we had alluded to, the first matchup that we're going to be focusing on is going to be that between the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's going to be quite interesting. So, Cole, I want to get, what are some of your early takes when it comes to this matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the first part that I'm most excited about, right, and just first of all, like, let's look at this from a fun standpoint, right? That's what this is about, and we're here to have fun. And, I mean, I'm most excited about seeing Xavier Worthy on the field. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Chiefs utilize him. I mean, everyone's calling him watching him get thrown around in press coverage in practice one day, all the way to having a great preseason and being the next Tyreek 2 or whatever. I don't know. So I'm excited to see Xavier Worthy on the field and see what happens there. And just see Mahomes be Mahomesian, right? It was so weird last year and just never felt right, even though they ended up winning it, which is so weird. But just the season never really felt to be in sync. They weren't super fun to watch most of the time. So I'm excited for a high-flying game. I think the Ravens are going to put up some points against the Chiefs. And, if the Chiefs keep it close, which, they're expected to win by 3. But the Ravens will pick up their pass game a little bit, and we might see an up-tempo game and see some fantasy points being scored.
Right. And then, one thing too I wanted to throw out your way, just when it comes to analyzing, let me just bring myself back onto the stage here. Okay. So yeah, when it comes to just even analyzing this matchup, man, like just like you said, Las Vegas has the over-under at 46, so it's going to be a relatively good scoring game. Nothing too crazy. But, just a few things and keynotes to go over here for this matchup specifically. The Ravens allowed the third, which actually was a little bit surprising, but the Ravens allowed the third most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers in 2023. And what's even more staggering, too, is the fact that we saw that this Kansas City offense, too, ran the 3 wide receiver sets. And I'm going to add this over here. If you this out here, 68.7% of the time. Now, I highlighted Marquise Hollywood Brown because he's not going to be playing in this matchup. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Rashee Rice is going to be doing. And Mike Clay has this really cool piece where he goes over cornerback as well as wide receiver matchups. And he has projected Rashee Rice getting a 20% target share. Oh, did my camera go out? Yeah, it did. Okay. Well, anyways, the point is Rashee Rice is slated to get a 20% target share, which is a pretty healthy amount considering that this offense is expected to be a high prolific one. And to switch things over to Kansas City is also hold on. Yeah, there you go. They ranked 11th most in points allowed to opposing wide receivers. So we're seeing some secondaries that could be had. I mean, of course, I'm expecting Zay Flowers to have a pretty good game. I mean, we did see that the secondary in Kansas City took a hit with them losing Snead. But I wanted to get your take. I mean, because Zay Flowers here, 6 in total route wins, 6 in route win rate, as well as 6 in win rate versus man coverage. What are you expecting to see out of the young Zay Flowers in this matchup, considering that we know that Lamar Jackson obviously has favored Mark Andrews for so long, but what's your take on Zay Flowers in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, Zay Flowers has really turned it on at the end of last season. He's the undisputed wide receiver 1. I think in this game, though, we might see a little bit different approach, at least initially to start with. I think the Ravens are probably going to lean on that run game initially that they've built up and kind of been wanting to lean into for so long now with Derrick Henry. Getting the 2 tight ends. You mentioned the 3 wide receiver sets and how often the Chiefs run that. And what's funny is the 11 personnel Baltimore ran that at the 5th lowest rate. So I actually kind of expect to see heavy run game, at least initially, try to control the clock, maybe some Mark Andrews, some Isaiah Likely, right? I mean, if they're only running 11 personnel at the 5th lowest rate, then that means there's oftentimes going to be 2 tight end sets. Isaiah Likely is going to be out there a lot. He's proved himself over the last few years. So I really see a pretty balanced approach. My hot take is I think Xavier Worthy outscores Zay Flowers this week. And, that's kind of a hot take, right? I mean, but I just think with the setup the way it is and kind of what the offenses are looking to do, it kind of makes sense. I mean, it's one of those things you watch, and of course, statistics and everything are great whenever we can boil all that down. But, you watch those Chiefs out there on the field, they were having fun, right? I mean, behind the back passes, they're laughing, they're out there. The starters are playing well into the game in preseason, just having a great time. For a fact, Patrick Mahomes is like, Andy Reid, let me play with my new toy just one time. Like, let me give him one deep bomb. And that's all you need. And I mean, it's going to work, and it's exciting. It's just exciting thinking about it because, they're going to get an opportunity or 2 at it. I mean, how many times did you see Marquez Valdez-Scantling streaking down the field wide open only to not catch the football,
Right. Yeah, there was one play where he thankfully didn't catch a ball versus Philadelphia that would have been a surefire game-winning touchdown, and thankfully went through his hands. So I'm sure a lot of Kansas City fans are pretty excited about Worthy, and like you said, that new toy that Patrick Mahomes has, because it feels like that they've been looking to replace that loss of that explosive wide receiver that they had before with Tyreek Hill.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then now let's go ahead and transition over. I know you alluded to the running game, and you expect it to be a bit more of a usage that Baltimore leans on. What's your take, though, on the other side, with Pacheco? I know that we've heard, the quote that we had in our last stream about how Pacheco was getting praises from Andy Reid about how he can do it all. And then obviously we saw that last season he was getting even more utilized towards the end of the year. He actually finished that season with actually 7th among running backs in red zone touches. Now we know that when it comes to this Baltimore defense, they are a little bit more stingy against the run. But what are you expecting out of Pacheco, being that we're both relatively high on him this season?
Yeah, expecting the game plan again from both these offenses. Initially they're both going to want to lean on it, initially, but The thing about Pacheco that we need to mention is, we recorded that podcast probably a week or so ago, let's say, at least since the last time we were on. And, something interesting that noteworthy has happened since then. And the whole thesis for Pacheco, not the whole thesis, but a major portion of the thesis was last year at the end of the stretch when McKinnon was no longer around, Pacheco just absorbed that entire role. And that role is massive. They can have it all. We haven't seen anyone absorb a 3-down role since Kareem Hunt almost had it with the Chiefs, in the second, really early on in his career. And though it's changed and everyone's going to, people might scoff and laugh at this, but the Samaje Perine signing was not some little feat. The initial news was that Perine was going to be traded after Denver was going to, everyone thought they were going to release him. And in this market, for someone to trade for a running back, first of all, and give up anything is insane. And so Perine is something to watch. So I think week 1, it's obviously going to be the least amount of Perine we see. But I'm going to be really interested. So I've kind of cooled, not necessarily cooled, and I'm cold on Pacheco. I'm just kind of more in the wait and see. I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess, is the best way to play it. So I think, I don't think Perine gets too involved this week. If Pacheco can get out there and handle business, I think he's going to keep that role no matter what. But we just want to see him get that pass catching role too, because that's what was so valuable for him at the end of last year.
Right. And for me, now making the transition going over to Baltimore, we do expect some good things from Derrick Henry. My concern being that this matchup is going to be relatively close. I mean, at least based on what Las Vegas is telling us will be with the over-under being at 47 with, KC only being favored by 3. I do get worried, though, about Derrick Henry in this matchup, but he could be just a touchdown away from at least making his outing be a good one. I mean, Henry has been efficient for so long. I've tried to, predict when the cliff will happen, and I've been proven wrong time and time again. I mean, it's crazy. Like, Cole, I was doing research for this video, and I couldn't believe that at 30, Henry was second in breakaway runs in 2023. He was top 10 in evaded tackles, and he was also top 10 in breakaway run rate. And I didn't think that was the case because he's so big and so physical. Now, again, with the lack of upside that he's able to provide because he's not much of a receiving running back, I do believe that he's still a good play here, considering that I believe, come, the goal line, Lamar's going to have a pretty exciting weapon to just hand the ball off to. And I don't know. I think he should be solid as a start here. I know that we're talking as far as redraft goes, as well as even with Dynasty, but even with just DFS, would you go ahead and feel comfortable having Derrick Henry plugged into your roster?
Yeah, I absolutely would. And the main thing I would point to is the Chiefs were seventh worst last year in yards before contact. And that is that's Derrick Henry's game, right? If you give Derrick Henry, a yard and a half or, whatever, just that little bit of daylight, that's where we saw those 99-yard runs, those iconic Titan runs versus Jacksonville. It seemed like every year he had some large run against them going, 26 carries for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. Right. And I think if the Chiefs, if there's a weakness, I think that there's 2 things that are going to happen. I think Lamar Jackson is, bragging about dropping weight, right? MVP, MVP last season, right? Comes back this season, and then he's like, all right, well, this season's about me dropping weight, and I'm going to run the football more because I've kind of let that fall off a little bit. He's going to come out running the football in these big games, and I think Derrick Henry and Lamar are going to be both potentially could dominate this game running the football, and I think that will be the most effective tool that the Ravens have tomorrow night. Will be Lamar and Derrick Henry running the football.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun to see them within the 20-yard line to the goal line, how they end up calling plays for those 2 guys. Because, oh my God, it's so scary. You have Lamar, who's obviously a freak of nature, and then you have Derrick Henry, who in his own right also fits in that category really well. So now when it comes to some of the guys that you had even mentioned, I like how you mentioned Samaje Perine, as well as Isaiah Likely. Are there any other players that you see as a deep play? Maybe if you're in a deeper roster, or maybe if you're just playing DFS, looking to just really hit big on one of those prize picks. Who is there anyone on your radar as far as that category goes?
Definitely, there's a few. So again, when I'm talking early season, right? Because we have no data to go off of as far as what's gone on in the season thus far. All we can go off of is what the coach speak that we've seen and what we've seen in preseason. And what they've shown is that they've been talking up Rashad Bateman for, again, like I know this is 3 years in a row doing it, but they've been talking up Rashad Bateman again as the for sure absolute number 2 in this offense as far as wide receivers go. So I think Rashad Bateman's going to get some looks as well. So like I said, I think the Chiefs are going to get Worthy some looks, and I really think Baltimore is going to force feed Rashad Bateman at least a few balls. I mean, we're talking 3 balls. If he catches 3 balls for 50 yards, that's a really good Rashad Bateman day. That speaks to one of the props that I do have is I do like Rashad Bateman over 30.5 yards. And then to what I talked about before with Xavier Worthy, the prop of 21.5 yards for the longest reception, you could go that route, or 44.5 yards total receiving. I mean, like I said, he's going to get his looks. He's going to get his chances, and Patrick Mahomes throwing the football. So the chances are in your favor there. I really like the longest, the 21.5, because he's going to get some deeper looks, and that's the middle of the field to deep is kind of where we're expecting Worthy to make his hay.
Right. Yeah. And then one thing too, I wanted to make mention as well. Actually, I didn't get a chance to show this earlier, but there's this pretty cool stat line I wanted to show about. I don't know if you remember this from the AFC Championship game, but let me go ahead and actually highlight this real quick. I was actually pretty shocked. Now that we're transitioning over to the tight ends, look how well Kelsey played last year in that game. 11 for 11, 116 yards, 1 touchdown. Now, of course, we're not saying he's going to replicate this exact same stat line, but I'm expecting. Baltimore did rank third, so they were the 3rd worst defense when it came to facing opposing tight ends as far as most points allowed. And of course, we're seeing the stat line. What are you anticipating out of the Travis Kelce Swifty gang for tomorrow night's game?
Yeah, right. I mean, look. Travis Kelce is going to produce to the level that Andy Reid plays him in the games, right? I mean, the reason that he played that well is because look at the top of that page, AFC Championship game, right? I mean, that's the story. And the question is what is Andy Reid going to do, right? It's a year older. They came out and said at the end of last year, yes, and you have to think about these things. And at least I give more credence whenever they just are fresh off a Super Bowl, right? It's February, right? They're bragging about their season, and they're like, because they're living it up, right? It's the time to do that. You worked hard, and now that's the time. So they're talking about the season. They're like, we intentionally held Kelce out so that we could use him at this time. It's week 1, right? You got Rashee Rice back. You don't know if he's going to get suspended. He ran similar routes. I kind of think that you might see some extra Rashee Rice and a little less Kelce potentially. And that's it's just based on what Andy Reid does with playing time. So that's going to be a great thing to watch is Travis Kelce's snap share. I expect his targets per route run to continue to be solid, right? If they're going to scale him back, I don't expect that to be at the cost of any targets necessarily, really. I mean, obviously a few, but they're going to scale him back on the plays and how much he's out there. But so that's an interesting thing to watch. That Travis Kelce playing time, snap share, and if they do continue to scale him back early in the season like they did last year, another year later.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the ball, Baltimore has a really good tight end with Mark Andrews, but there is a really interesting stat that I read in your notes that I thought was worthy of sharing, and that is how he's fared up against Steve Spagnuolo. So I'll go ahead and give you the floor after I just tease that up for you there for a bit.
Yeah, incredible, right? I mean, Mark Andrews, 1 game over 22 receiving yards in his last 5 against Steve Spagnuolo's defense. I mean, and that other game was like 57 yards. So it's not like he lit it up or anything either. I think he went 5 for 57, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's a lot of 3 for 22s, a lot of 1 for 7, some 0 for 0s. So that's kind of what's giving me a little trepidation. With a lot of the passing game, right? So I've already come on here and talked a little bit about, Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is going to have a fine game. I'm a little worried about how well Andrews is going to do. And if they can't work Andrews in the middle of the field, I'm a little bit worried about the passing game in general, which is why I think that run game is really going to work well for them.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? someone's asking it in the chat, and you've already alluded to this earlier. The question was, do you think that Likely will eat into Andrews' targets? And I think for this game, to answer that question, maybe, because of how well Spagnuolo has played Mark Andrews. Season long, we don't believe that Likely is going to really eat into Mark Andrews' production, right?
Right, and I think it's going to be a similar thing because, I mean, what's been the story with Andrews, right? I mean, talk about someone, who's going to be tight end, if I haven't looked it up, but let's say he's tight end 2 or 3 over the last few years in points per game, sure. But he finishes tight end 5 through 7 often because he's injured in a lot of games. So similar, I guess, in a way to the Kelsey idea. If Likely eats into it, I expect most of Likely snaps to come in two wide receiver sets, 2 tight end sets. I mean, like we talked about before, Lamar and the Ravens are perfectly fine running a bottom 5, 3 wide receiver set, 2 tight end set offense. So I think he's going to see most of his playing time there. But yeah, I think with the injury history of Andrews and their playoff aspirations, I think they're going to be doing something similar, right? I mean, they just watched Andy Reid do the same thing with Kelsey, right? And then talk about it. I don't think they're going to be shy to keep Andrews a little rested throughout the season either. Right.
Yeah. And then just to put a bow on this one, let's go ahead and go over predictions. I want to go. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, Cole, if I saw the Ravens win this matchup. I mean, we saw what happened last year. And this goes back to the theme of how we know that Kansas City is a team that typically has slower starts, but it's because they know they're going to be in it at the very end. And they talked about this too, right? So my gut says Kansas City is going to win it tomorrow just because I can see Mahomes putting up a pretty good showdown up against Lamar. But the whole storyline of Lamar losing weight, then you have Derrick Henry in the mix. I mean, wouldn't surprise me, but I'm going to go ahead and make a stance and say that Kansas City is going to go ahead and cover the spread. And even I can't imagine them winning more by 3, so I'm going to take they're going to win by 3 tomorrow. What's your pick for tomorrow's game?
Yeah, I mean, my first bet, and this was a guaranteed winner, okay? Absolutely. Okay. And this is something that hasn't happened in probably 180 days, but I'm going over half a NFL football game being played tomorrow. And so that is excited. There will be more than there will be one football game, which is more than we've had in a really long time. That's the bet I'm most excited about. Over one half of a game tomorrow. I'm taking the over there. I'm taking the over on Friday. I'm taking the over on Sunday. I mean, we're back, right? But as far as the game goes, I tend to agree with you. I like the Chiefs. I like the Chiefs this week. Got it.
So then we got Kansas City winning their season opener versus the Baltimore Ravens. So now let's go ahead and transition over to the next game we got, which is the Green Bay Packers. I was going to say visiting Philadelphia, but they're going to more so meet Philadelphia in Brazil for a historic matchup. The first time the NFL has gone to South America to go play, and we have my beloved Eagles facing the Packers. A few storylines here. Las Vegas has this over-under at 48.5. What we do know about this team is that, for starters, Philadelphia struggled last year mightily. Of course, we know about the huge letdown they had towards the end of the year with their tragic collapse. And of course, me as an Eagles fan, it was hard for me to experience. However, Philadelphia last year struggled within their secondary. They were the absolute worst in most points allowed to opposing wide receivers. Now, one thing I will tell you, this does mean that you're going to want to fire up all your Green Bay wide receivers versus the secondary. Now, I know they've made some moves. They made some really good and very strategic draft picks within this Philadelphia Eagles secondary, but I'm still a little bit concerned about how they're going to do because it's still a very young and very, I guess you can say, a defense that could be had. Now, as far as the Green Bay Packers go, the Packers were middle of the pack versus wide receivers, but the thing is, you don't want to overthink this, right? And this is cool where I'm going to bring you in. I mean, when it comes to assessing these wide receivers for Philadelphia going up against Green Bay, who's middle of the pack, granted, very good defense, but I mean, you're not going to overthink this. You're going to play AJ Brown. You're going to play Devontae Smith. I mean, if you're in a deeper league, maybe Dallas Goedert becomes a question mark, but I mean, what's your take with Philadelphia going up against this defense? And from a fantasy perspective, how do you approach it? If you approach anything really, considering it's going to be only week 1.
Sure. Well, and again, obviously we want to look at everything through the week one light, but we're also trying to get so much information that we've been dying for, we've been so thirsty for the last few months, right? I mean, who's playing that slot role in Kellen Moore's offense, right? Is it AJ Brown? Is it Devonta Smith? I think AJ Brown, just like you said, I'm not overthinking this one at all. Like we said at the beginning, I think this is going to be a pretty straightforward game, in my opinion. I think you play your studs. Your AJ Brown's going to light it up. Devonta Smith's going to do well. You know, I think Hurts is going to do well. Now, Goddard, I like Goddard this week. I like Goddard this season. I don't necessarily, he's not in the top 10 tight ends for me. You know, that Njoku Ferguson tier, I think, is like the end of a tier. But I think he's, you know, a tier of his own before, the Dalton Schultz tier and that sort of thing. So I like Goddard as a play, tight end premium leagues, that sort of thing. I think he's going to get you 10 points and in a tight end, and that's in a single PPR league. So that's good tight end score. So I'd be looking to play Goddard unless I had one of those top 10 tight ends.
Right. So now I'm going to divert back to you because you are the best ball DFS expert here. How do you approach guys that aren't as popular? So, for example, I'll throw a few names your way. I have 3 already top of my head that I want to throw your way and get your take. You already answered one of them, which is Dallas Goedert. But the first one is the one that Philadelphia just traded for recently from the Commanders, and that's Jahan Dotson. DFS, deeper leagues, how are you approaching Jahan Dotson? Being that I know we just talked about week one, we want to find out, okay, how are these guys being utilized? But what's your early take on Jahan Dotson in this Philadelphia Eagles offense?
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep in mind this has always been a super concentrated offense. Now, if Kellen Moore comes in and potentially changes that, I mean, I guess we'll see. I love Jahan Dotson, right? He was a top 21 pick, just a couple years ago in the NFL draft. There's a reason why they wanted out from underneath him so bad. I mean, he doesn't cost a lot, so it's a little iffy there. Right. And again, week one, we're going to be more seeing, does he have the third, is he the third down receiver? Does he have that role locked up? We think so. What's that actually worth? And so, I mean, I like him as a sleeper. I think there's some additional options week one that I'd be looking at. Like I'd rather play Rashad Bateman week one than Jahan Dotson, just because the role, they're trying to get Bateman involved. Jahan Dotson's an afterthought, right? They just added him. He's not going to be in their game plan yet. Now, ideally, Jahan Dotson gets in there and shows well and shows that just the fit wasn't right with the Commanders and shows his talent again. But that's going to take time. I mean, maybe second half of the year we see an onset of Dotson, but I'm not getting overly optimistic until then.
Gotcha. Okay, so then it's more so let's go ahead and wait for the smoke to clear, see how Kellen Moore utilizes these weapons. But yeah, like we said, when it comes to these Philadelphia Eagle wide receivers, as far as the ones that we know of and who have a solidified role, we're starting them. We're firing them up if they're on your roster. No need to overthink that. Now, let's go ahead and shift over because I know I didn't introduce the Green Bay Packers while you were out during this segment. But when it comes to, for example, Jaden Reed, then you obviously have all these other weapons that we're so curious about, like Christian Watson. Is there, and of course, Romeo Doubs. But which one do you see yourself really feeling confident with, not only for week one, but just rest of season, being that it feels like there's a lot of question marks about who's going to really be the main one to own in this roster?
Well, it's funny that you asked that because I have in my notes, Doubs, Reed, Watson, they're all the same to me. They really are. I mean, I think their projections are going to be around 10, 11 PPR points, all 3 of them. Wicks will come in lower, at maybe like 7, 8 PPR points expected this week. But I really like Wicks's upside. I mean, I think what I'm looking for in this offense, in all transparency, I mean, I want to see, you need to see somebody separate. And we kind of know their roles, right? Dobbs is going to be the vertical X receiver that gets a decent amount of target share for a vertical X like that. Jaden Reed's going to get some targets drawn up to him. I think he ran super hot on touchdowns last year. I don't think he's the automatic one necessarily. I really would like to see Dontavian Wicks get some love and get an opportunity this year. I think he's the one that could really separate in the end. But initially, you got to say, I mean, if everyone's healthy, I mean, the coaches want to use Christian Watson in that role. They want to prove that the draft pick was right. They've taken him to like hamstring camp, like, I mean, I didn't even know you could do that. Like he went to a hamstring summer camp. Like what?
Right.
So I mean, they're invested in him. So I mean, again, it's all pick your favorite, right? In DFS, if you're playing DFS, on like a showdown slate on DraftKings or something like that, slide one in your captain role, because a lot of people in those situations, none of us know, right? And so people will just avoid that situation entirely. But in like a DFS lineup where you're playing a tournament against, 12,000 other individuals, you have a few different lineups. So you're trying to have your absolute perfect outcome. So just pick one as if you're right. It could be any of those four, and any four of those could have an awesome game. We've seen all four of them do it.
Right. And then now, as we now transition over towards the running backs, obviously the big name is Saquon Barkley there in Philadelphia. He was the big free agency acquisition for them. Green Bay, they did allow the 8th most touchdowns to opposing running backs. I think if you're doing Price Picks or any one of those, pick 'em kind of platforms, I believe Saquon getting a touchdown would be something that we can expect to see happen. But I mean, outside of that, though, what are you expecting with Saquon in this offense? And as far as props go, anything specific that you're wanting to focus on with Saquon Barkley there in Philadelphia?
Well, I mean, I'll flip the script back on you, just because this is your hometown team. I mean, this is, I'd like to know what you're thinking for this. I mean, that you're the person I would be coming to for this information anyway. So we might as well get it on here and just and show everybody the awesome advice I get on the side via text message from you.
All right, here, let me then remove you from the stage and I'll go ahead and take over this segment. So, okay, here's what we can expect from Saquon Barkley. This is insider information that I have for you guys. He's really good at football. That is one thing I do know, that he is really talented. He has really big quads. No, but all jokes aside, I know it was really off character to see Philadelphia invest in a running back, considering that they've never done this. I mean, last season we saw DeAndre Swift fill in for Miles Sanders, and he did just fine in that offense. Now we're seeing Saquon Barkley, an elite running back that we know can be really explosive. But one thing I will want us to focus on, just like Cole had said, when it comes to week 1, we're trying to see, okay, what our team's going to be doing, how are they going to be utilizing these weapons? And for me, the one area that I'm most interested in is how are they going to utilize Jalen Hurts as well as Saquon Barkley once they get into the goal line? Because we obviously know the infamous tush push. It's what has worked well for Philadelphia. How do you now approach it with a elite running back like Saquon Barkley? And as I alluded to before, Green Bay is middle of the pack versus running backs. They can be had, especially when it comes to the end zone. Last season, they did give up the 8th most touchdowns to opposing running backs. Now, I believe that that's going to be the one thing. Like, I don't personally believe that Saquon's value is going to get vultured by Jalen Hurts, but it's still something very mindful to see, considering that obviously the offensive line is still really good. I mean, of course, they did lose Jason Kelce in this offense, but my hope is that you'll see Saquon early on used just to kind of like showcase this new exciting weapon. But one area of focus for me, at least, is going to be how are they going to utilize this combo of Hurts, who obviously can be a power runner, with that combination of also having Saquon Barkley there in that backfield. So that is my take, and that is, I guess, the one area of focus that I would have for any NFL fan for Friday night's game versus the Green Bay Packers.
I love it. And I agree with you. I mean, I think Saquon, that, like you mentioned, you kind of underplayed the offensive line. I mean, it's a great offensive line. I mean, the amount of 100-yard games that Saquon's going to have, if you get extra points for 100-yard games, I mean, Saquon's a great running back to have for that.
Right. Okay, so with that, though, so let's go ahead and start landing the plane with this matchup here. Let's go ahead and get into some predictions. Green Bay versus, well, you know what? You know what's funny? Let me just back up just 1 second. You did say that for sure tomorrow we're going to get more than half a game. With all the talk with Brazil and how players are advised to stay in their hotels, that may not be as much of a surefire bet to make, considering that there's so many question marks, like what's going to take place in Brazil.
That's true. That's a good point. Oh, one thing we haven't touched on. So I guess you got to bet the over for Thursday game, over one game, and then try to bet the under, and like you'd probably get like plus like 50 million. Like you just. Right. But no, one thing to talk about though is Josh Jacobs, right? I mean, tough run defense, but I mean the story of the offseason, for the Packers has been that running back room, right? And first of all, getting Jacobs, letting Aaron Jones go, and then getting Jacobs there, and then being like, okay, but we're going to add Lloyd, we're still going to use AJ Dillon, and we're going to draft, Marshawn Lloyd, and we're going to use them a lot. LaFleur says, we're going to have basically a running back by committee. Oops, right. AJ Brown stinger. Oh no, we're gonna put Marshawn Lloyd on the IR. Actually, no, AJ Dillon just got a stinger. He's going on the IR. Marshawn Lloyd, you're back in. It's disheveled, and we don't love Josh Jacobs as far as like efficiency goes and that sort of thing, and especially against this defense. But I don't know where else they're gonna go. So I think, another inefficient Josh Jacobs game where he gets you 14 or 15 PPR points and you're happy that you drafted him in the 4th round. I could see that here. So I'd be starting Josh Jacobs here because, it's week 1, right? I mean, I don't think you're going to have 23 other running backs going to be better than him. You're probably going to be starting him, and I'd be starting him with some level of confidence, not on any efficiency, but the volume should be there.
Right. And then one stat I actually wanted to show your way as well. Oh, let me go. Sorry, let me pull that up again. The stat I wanted to show here was Philadelphia's efficiency last season on defense versus the opposing running back. As you can see, 7th fewest running back fantasy points on a per game average versus those running backs. And but I mean, to your point though, with Green Bay, I doubt you have any better options if you have Josh Jacobs there as one of your running backs, considering that, of course, we know what's going to be the situation with AJ Dillon being out for the season. Then, of course, you have also Marshawn Lloyd, who is going to be playing from what I hear. I haven't heard that he's going to be sitting out, but I know he's been dealing with a few injury concerns, being that he hasn't played all of training camp as well as wasn't too involved in the preseason. But regardless, though, with things really showcasing how with Josh Jacobs, since he was in Las Vegas, saw a huge, heavy opportunity share. We believe is going to continue that same trend here in Green Bay as well. So for me, I believe that Josh Jacobs, like you said, you can start him with confidence. Also considering the fact that, there isn't many options there that we believe that you would be able to pivot from anyways. So Josh Jacobs for me is an easy must start despite the tough matchup. But don't be surprised too if he doesn't have a good game, considering that he's going up against a tough front 7.
Yeah, it's going to be inefficient is the thought for sure. But the point should be here just on volume.
Absolutely.
If you're in a league, we talked about Goddard. Musgrave is also someone that you could look at. Tucker Kraft kind of ran a lot of the year and did really well for them. And he was the lower draft pick. If you remember, I think they were both 3rd round picks, but Musgrave was always supposed to be more of the pass catcher and was hurt a lot of last year. And Kraft stepped up in that role. But Kraft had that pec injury, I think, during the offseason. I'm just saying, like, if that would be, we were talking about the Green Bay pass catchers and everyone's like trying to figure out who the pass catcher is. And like, dude, Luke Musgrave could be the answer this whole time in a depleted late round tight end environment. Just keep an eye on Luke Musgrave and see that and watch what happens between him and Tucker Kraft. You might have a star on your hands with Luke Musgraves because he has the skill set.
Right. Yeah, not bad at all. So, okay, here, as we land the plane, I do want to give you the floor, Cole, because like I said, I will submit to you that you are the more DFS expert among both of us. So with that, are there any points you want to cover? And then from there, we can then just put a bow on it by then going over some early waiver wire targets, considering that we're seeing some players that should be stashed on your roster. So go ahead and take it from here with some of your DFS picks.
That is exactly what I have. I have some waiver wire here, some waiver wire options here that I think are going to be some great options, and some I just utilized as waivers ran just 2 hours ago. So I've already picked up some of these players in some of my leagues. As far as DFS goes, I mean, again, DFS, we're going to have the showdown slates. We're going to have 2 separate nights, right? So let's say you're playing DraftKings showdown slate. A couple people that I mentioned liking. I mean, obviously, everyone's going to like Patrick Mahomes and all the pass catchers. You know all those guys. Nelson Aguilar, super sleeper. Again, very low on on 11 personnel, but when they go to 11 personnel, Nelson Aguilar does get on the field. So Nelson Aguilar could be a great sleeper. Might catch a couple passes, and then in the other game, I really like Dallas Goedert. I think Dallas Goedert, Luke Musgrave, I think those tight ends could do something there. And again, what we're watching a lot of is just going to be, we're going to have a lot more information going forward, right? So what we're really really looking at here is going to be not necessarily like the actual results. Week 1 is going to be data gathering, right? So we obviously have some favorites and whatnot, but what we're watching for is snap share, targets per route run, not necessarily results. We're going to utilize this information on a short sample and extrapolate that out, and that's how we're going to find edges over the next few weeks. And so really we're watching less of the box score and a lot more of like we have different theses going on for each individual team and how they're going to operate a lots of times. And there's going to be edge as soon as we know which pathway these coaches are going.
Right. That's so good. Yeah. And actually, one thing I do want to introduce as well is I know that we're going to now also be going over some of these matchups in a couple of days as far as it'll be more rapid fire, but we wanted to obviously squeeze as much as we possibly could, being that we obviously have 2 games to cover. But as we get ready to land the plane though, Cole, what are some rapid fire waiver wire ads that players can start adding right now before waivers start running next week? Because I mean, right now, if you start picking them up, they could be free agents that you don't have to spend any fab on. Who are some guys that you're targeting at this range right now?
Right. In a lot of leagues, waivers ran today. It was the first week after the draft. People are like, I have my team. Like, don't even think about like things have transpired and changed since then. First of all, if Jaleel McLaughlin is on your waiver wire right now, pause this and go pick him up. We'll wait.
Right.
Nice. Great pickup. That's going to be a league winner for you. And you just showed why you can't win your league at the draft. That pickup is going to help you. Andre Yoshivas. I mean, talk about Yoshi, right? If you search your league for last name Yoshivas, you're not going to find it. It's spelled IOS, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I wrote it down, but V at that point, iOS or something. So he's now going to be the Bengals wide receiver 3. We kind of felt like that was going to be the lean, and kind of he had the inside track all along. I have him in a lot of dynasty leagues I picked up at the end of last year. They drafted Jermaine Burton, so like the initial height was raised because like he's a really good prospect out of Alabama. Ton of off the field concerns, but like the talent was first round level. But like they're questioning his professionalism. He's falling asleep in meetings. Like this is Yoshi's like a Cooper Kupp level, like devoted to the game, like talks about it in interviews. So, I mean, he's someone that could run away with this and come out of nowhere, but some people have picked him up and been watching this for a couple of years. Dontavian Wicks, we already talked about it. If he's on your waiver wire, pick him up. No questions asked. Jordan Mason, go get Jordan Mason. If he's on your waiver wire, there's very few running backs in this day and age that if the starter goes down, you have a bell cow. Most people are splitting carries, right? Jordan Mason, Samaje Perine. Go get Samaje Perine. Rico Dowdle. These are all great options that are going to be like, you can start these guys. Like, I'm a huge Rico Dowdle fan. Like, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I'm just quietly loaded up on my Rico Dowdle. The Dalvin Cook thing is more of a scare than anything else. He was with the Jets. He was like, he never played. It was the same thing then, right? Like, congratulations to his agent that got Tom Pelissero to write that like raving review of Dalvin Cook like it was 2017 again. Like, I don't know where that came from, but he's not going to do anything. Zeke is his yards per carry, his efficiency just tanked. So I'd be looking at Rico Dowdle and then a super deep one. I'll give you 2 super deep ones. One super deep already, and then way, way deep. Greg Dortch, wide receiver 3 for Arizona. That offense is going to be uptick. And then Ray McLeod, if you have a huge bench.
Wow.
Same thing. Atlanta's number 3, right? Darnell Mooney's the 2. And think about Cousins. I mean, he's had Thielen, Diggs. He's always had 2 awesome players and then still had like a Hawkinson. Who's the second? KJ Osborne too. So you have London, you have Pitts. Who's that next person? Mooney, maybe, probably, but maybe Ray.
Right. Okay. So with that here, you know what? Let's throw a little. We'll call this audible real quick. There's a few good questions here in the chat that I'm going to pull up. You'll be able to see them on the screen, but I'll read them out to you. Okay. The first one I want to actually put up here, and it's from NMB, and he asks, would you trade Godwin and Ford, I'm assuming Jerome Ford, for Javonte, I'm assuming Javonte Williams, and Christian Watson, full per, I'm assuming full PPR. So let me go and read that again. Would you trade Chris Godwin, Jerome Ford for Javonte and Christian Watson, full PPR? And you know what? This obviously doesn't give us enough context because we don't know. This is a 10-team league, 12-team. We'll just assume regular 12-team league. Cole, trade Godwin and Ford for Javonte and Watson, who has the edge there on that trade?
Yeah, you know what? I'm probably gonna. It depends, right? Again, if you're competing this year for the title, I mean, you might want to go Godwin and Ford. Ford's gonna get you 8 to 10 games as the RB1 for Cleveland. That's valuable, right? Godwin, a little bit on the older side, right? Supposed to move into the slot, solid. What's the upside? We don't know. Probably not anything crazy anymore. So, like, if you're looking at strict value for this year, you probably want to go Godwin and Ford if it's dynasty.
Right.
Like if you're going for this year. But however, what I would do if it were me, I want the youth, right? I want Javonte, 23 years old, if I'm not mistaken, as a running back, like had an injury kind of down on him. I went and traded for him. You saw that. I went after him aggressively in a lot of leagues because, you know, and that Sean Payton offense has always been fantastic to running backs. Like that's the Jaleel McLaughlin like love, right? Is that Darren Sproles and like pass catching role. And then you always had that thumper in there also, and that's Javonte. And then Christian Watson, what if they got his hamstring figured out at hamstring camp? Like, what if he's fixed, right? They want to make him the one. So I look at upside, right? Like Godwin and Ford, sure. Like you're going to get some good games. Like the first 10 weeks of the year, that's going to look great. For the next 4, 5, 7 years, that Javonte Watson side's what's going to look better to me.
I agree. Okay, yeah, and he did actually correct himself. He did put PPR in here. So yeah, I have to lean on the exact same thing. I'm big on Javonte ever since he came into the league. He went to North Carolina, right? If I remember correctly. Well, anyways, the point is I was a big fan of him as a prospect. And yeah, I'm just big on him. And for some reason, I can't get Cole to budge and give me an offer for him. So, so next question I have here is Bateman, 16-team league. Who cares about Bateman? Well, this was more so in the context of DFS that we're talking about, right? When you're talking about Rashad Bateman as a play for tomorrow night's matchup.
Yeah, right. So I mean, we're talking about deep sleepers, right? In the context of deep sleepers, and it might be a 16-team league. It might be DFS. It might be the last-minute best ball leagues you're trying to get into, right? I mean, the whole idea is that everybody knows of Zay Flowers, right? Everyone's going to draft Zay Flowers, but we're trying to give you some information of things that aren't necessarily talked about, right? Debating wide receiver 3s and tight end 2s. Like these things matter, right? Like that's where that's because you're right. It doesn't matter right now. And Bateman doesn't have a lot of like long-term value as far as like someone that you want to stash in dynasty or anything like that. He's probably a little bit played out. But lots of times these players that we're talking about are up and coming, like this Luke Musgrave thing, right? Like no one's talking about Luke Musgrave, but this pectoral thing flares up for Tucker Kraft again, and there's one tight end set. You're looking good. And so that's why we talk about these things, is because there are a lot of alt things out there. Like for instance, like I've probably drafted Rashad Bateman like 77 times this offseason, right? And you're like, how, why, and like what? But it's, you know, there's things out there where he's valuable for sure.
Right. Very good. Okay, so next one I got here is thoughts on Russ this year in the Arthur Smith system. Now, obviously, we know the Arthur Smith. Well, actually, no, yeah, both Russell as well as Arthur Smith have not had the best experiences when it comes to the context of fantasy. I'm looking more of an uptick for the running backs there, but what are you seeing with Russell Wilson and what he'll do in this offense with Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh?
No, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the running backs, right? That's where we start. So, I mean, a lot of Najee Harris, a lot of Jaylen Warren. You know, I think Najee's going to get the first go at it, especially like Jaylen Warren with a hamstring injury. And that's always been the push, right? Jaylen Warren's always been at his heels, but everyone's always kind of ridden Najee. Now, the Russ thing is difficult, right? Because I don't know what to expect. Like, is it Russ? Is it Fields? Like, when's that transition? Like, you have to figure the idea was that, you know, one of them's going to work out. The hope is, and you would think, you know, they want the youth to kind of like prolong. Russ isn't their long-term answer. So I just don't know how much leash he's going to have. I just don't trust Arthur Smith with last year. So, I mean, my thoughts on Russ is just, as much as I love the guy, it's just, I don't love what's happened to him lately. He's just, I don't know. The Russ thing is just, it's gone off the rails a little bit. Like, I know I'm in the jersey and this is, you know, I have all the things behind me, but man, that guy's had a rough couple of years.
All right, here you go. So a few more questions here, then we'll go to land the plane. This one is from Johan Vasquez, and actually huge shout out. I think this is probably the most engagement we've had in a while in a live stream. So thank you everyone for the comments. But here you go. Johan Vasquez is asking, hope you guys are doing good. We hope you're doing well as well. Currently in a 12-man PPR league. Who do I bench? Rico no, sorry, Rice, Nico, Marvin, London. Okay, so we'll assume. Let's go ahead and do this. This is a. All right, cool. Here, we'll do this scenario. This is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. So you have to bench one of them. So you get to put 2 in your wide receiver slot, and then you get to bench 1. You have Rashee Rice, you have Nico Collins, you have Marvin Harrison, and you have London. Now at this point, I think it just comes. It will just come up to who do you think will have the better matchup. So I'll let you go ahead and go first.
First of all, I'd like to know the rest of your league. And I guess we said earlier that you can't win a league at your draft. I guess if you have to bench one of these guys, congratulations on your draft. Wow. I hope that's a dynasty league because you are set for a long time.
Right.
You know what? Week 1, I mean, it's pretty simple to me on this one. I'm for sure starting Rice and Nico. And so your decision comes between the 2 guys new to their respective offenses. And I'm just going to go ahead and not start the rookie. I'm going to start Drake London with Atlanta, Kirk Cousins coming to town. He's going to get his volume. I'm not even trying to say wait and see on Marvin Harrison. Don't hear that because that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying if you have an abundance of riches like Johan Vasquez here, congratulations. I would sit Marvin Harrison if I absolutely had to.
Yeah, I think the one that I will, just to kind of give us some variety here with our answer, I would probably bench Nico, even though I get your point. But I love the excitement of Marvin Harrison there with Kyler Murray. And I'm gonna, granted, I don't have any Stephon Diggs on any of my rosters. I think I only have him on 1 or 2 of my dynasty leagues. But the point is, I don't think that he's not going to do what I think he's going to do a little bit better than we are anticipating. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go with Rice, Marvin Harrison, start London, bench Nico, because I'm really curious to see how they're going to use all that talent there in Houston with not only Nico, but you obviously have Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. And then this is we have 2 more. So here we'll go into what this one. Rather, we have this one. This is from All in One Show. He's asking 12-team full PPR: Daniels, Jacob, Walker, Hill, Wilson, Andrews, Flowers.
I think he's just. I
see.
Is that a question, or is he just telling us how sick his team is?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm seeing the second comment here, and he's asking. Okay. Should I start Higgins over Flowers as my flex? So let's go back. So I'm assuming, cool. So we're assuming Jaden Daniels. He has Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Tyreek Hill, Wilson. Would that be Roman Wilson?
Mark
Andrew. I don't know who the Wilson would be. Or is it Michael Wilson?
Garrett
from Arizona.
Garrett Wilson.
Or Garrett Wilson. I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot about Garrett. Okay, so then
he said he had Higgins and Flowers. I think Flowers. Man, that's so close. Well, I mean, is Chase if Chase doesn't sign, it's Higgins by a mile, right? So that's worth something. So I mean, if Chase hasn't he was walked on the practice field today, great. And was limited, but if he's doesn't have a contract and doesn't have confirmation he's playing, I think you got to lean into the possibility that you get Higgins wide receiver 1. They're pretty close. I think Higgins and Flowers are probably about within a point of projection, to Higgins' favor, and then plus you get some upside there if he sits. I like Higgins this year. I think he's still a little slept on.
Right. And All in One did clarify it was Garrett Wilson. So yeah, you're right. And also, man, these rosters are so amazing. Kudos on you guys for taking advantage of your dumb league mates.
Draft this, right? If they were listening to your pod on some of this, it's I don't know if this was these comments were just a humble brag. You're check out these listeners. These teams are so stacked.
Right. I mean, dude. I mean, we've seen some pretty crazy rosters, but these ones are pretty good. So if you took my advice,
Andrews, one more note there. I'm more and more leaning to T Higgins. I mean, if you already have Andrews and you are it's week 1, I don't think I want to start Andrews and Flowers against the Chiefs defense. I would probably diversify a little bit, and you have some sick upside if Chase doesn't play, and it's still Burrow to Higgins. It's not like you're losing out, and projections even still kind of probably favor Higgins a little bit.
Right. And then he put over here, we got one from Wilt. So many good players this year. I'm stoked. Yeah, there's a lot of great players in fantasy, especially if you had a good time and you listened to this podcast and took our advice, because I'm sure you have some pretty good rosters now. But all right, guys. So with that, we are landing the plane here. And I want to say first and foremost, thank you for everyone that commented. We're going to be back again. I don't know if Cole's going to be available this Saturday, but if you're available, Cole, we're going to do a rapid fire of the remaining matchups that we have, including the Monday Night Football as well as the Sunday Night Football matchups. We'll be doing that Saturday, and we're also introducing a pretty fun new segment. We'll go ahead and tell them about it right now. We are calling it Guillotine Chris, kind of doing a little Macho Man Randy. Yeah, that's you, right? Guillotine Chris?
It's not me. I never heard of this guy. He sounds crazy.
No, he sounds pretty crazy. Well, here, I'll go ahead and show you a little bit of a teaser.
I like someone whose name is Guillotine Chris. That sounds like a cool person. I want to meet him someday.
So yeah, be sure to stay tuned for that. That's going to be coming up relatively soon. A fun new segment for the podcast. And if you are brand new here as well, please consider liking, subscribing. I want to give a huge thank you to my good friend Cole over here. You are now becoming a regular staple of the show. Can't thank you enough for your time, my friend. Really hope you had fun time. So.
I love it. That, guys. Always appreciate the invite. Thank you so much. It's so fun to get on here, talk fantasy football. Dude, we have football in less than 24 hours. I am excited. I won't be sleeping tonight. Anyone can feel free to text me for additional takes.
One more sleep, and we're back to the end of. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you guys on the next one. You guys have a wonderful night. Peace.